Welcome to Soulful Practices Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Holling-Brooks, and over the past 20 years, I have been on a journey of healing and awakening. I'm also a coach and practitioner for clients on their journey of unbridling their true self. The number one question I'm asked is, what meditation or practice will help me reach my goals? While there is no one meditation or secret mantra that will unlock our own awakening, there is a doorway that will lead us there. And that's the doorway of learning and cultivating the skills of self-reflection and contemplation. Each episode of this podcast offers you pocket teachings and practices that you can implement right away to help you courageously connect with living your authentic soul-led life. Let's dive into this week's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special episode of Soulful Practices. And this is a soulful conversation with the beautiful Sarah Peyton. Sarah, I am so excited to have you here and to be in this beautiful space with us. Thank you so much for saying yes to this soulful conversation.
Oh, Michelle, what a sweet thing it is to be here with you.
I want to introduce you, just in case you haven't heard of Sarah and her body of work. Just real quick, we're going to be talking about the main book we're going to focus on in this conversation is her little yellow book, and it's Affirmations for Turbulent Times. And we are in those, Sarah. We are in those. So I think it's great, but her bigger body of work is in the resonant self work, and it's just so beautiful. It aligns completely with my work and what's come through for me. She also has a workbook with that as well, and we'll put all those in the show notes below. But who she is, just let me introduce you real quick, Miss Sarah, in case people haven't met you or they know your work, that you are an author, right? An international constellations facilitator, which I love, being able to see the web and the interweavings and how these different aspects of us and our family and our lineages come together to support us. I love constellation work. And you're also a nonviolent communication and neuroscience educator and teacher. And so that deeply informs your work and how you integrate all of that together with the brain science and using the resonant language. So instead of it being hollow and kind of mechanical and clunky and talking about all these different places, you really embody it and bring it into how do we partner with these systems and within us? How do we befriend them versus just seeing them as these sterile cogs and wheels that are gumming us up and getting stuck? And that's what I love about your work. You have spoken to audiences all around the world, and we are so pleased to have you here as well. Is there anything that I missed in there?
Nothing important. The only important thing is that we get to be here and that we get to be excited together.
Yeah. So Sarah, I mean, how did you, this is the kind of eclectic, so constellation, neuroscience educator, nonviolent communication, really bringing that together. And you're very open also about your own trauma history and how this really was something that came into your healing. And I know for myself and our audiences, that is that journey, that healing journey that we have all gone on in some way, shape, form, or fashion to reclaim ourselves. After life has somehow ripped that away, there's that ocean that separates us between ourselves and who we truly know we are, right? Who we feel in our heart we are. And how we reclaim that and bring that back in. So I'd love for you just to share, if you feel comfortable with that, a little bit about how did this work, this beautiful work and this body of work that you have put together, come together?
Came together in part because of two extraordinary women, and also because of my extraordinary adopted son. But I'll start with the two extraordinary women. When I was about 18 years old, I moved away from home to another state to go to university, and I was coming from my family of origin, which looked fine on the outside. But my mom had dissociative identity disorder. So she couldn't really track me or that I existed, sort of in a funny way. When I called her up, I would have to call her and say, "Hi, Mom, this is Sarah." Because if I said, "Hi, Mom," she wouldn't know who I was. She only had one daughter. And if I said, "Hi, this is Sarah," she wouldn't know which Sarah I was. And if I said, "Hi, Mom, this is Sarah," then she would be able to find me in her fractured brain. Her brain was fractured by trauma, by early trauma, which is what early trauma does to brains. So, of course, her brain was fractured. Like just 2 years ago, I was visiting my cousin and she gave me a newspaper clipping from my mother's divorce proceedings, where my mother's mother described the night that my grandfather tried to kill her and my mother, and that she had to hide his gun in the oven where he did not even think of looking. And so she saved them from being killed. And then she wanted to divorce him, which makes a lot of sense. But this gives me a little bit of a blink into my mom's early life before the age of 3. And those kinds of really intense experiences before the age of 3 really fracture little people's brains. So my mom did really well for having that kind of background. She was an extraordinary, smart, and very personable woman. But she, like I said, she didn't know that I existed really with very many parts of her fractured brain. So that then creates a different kind of confusion for a person. And for me, it created a confusion of self-blame. Like I really thought there was something wrong with me, and that if I were only the perfect daughter, then my mother would be able to find me. And of course, that's not true, but that's what I believed. And when you believe that you're so seriously that there's something wrong with you, then that creates a different kind of impact on the brain. It doesn't fracture you and make you not able to remember, but it can lead to things like suicidality. It can lead to depression, anxiety, to a lot of dissociation, all of which I brought with me out of my family of origin. And then I met this amazing woman who I just loved her from the very first moment. And she for some reason, I mean, it's just like something like the universe put us together. She loved me, and she was like, she'd done a lot of healing, and she was like, Sarah, you are completely dissociated, come back to me now. And she would like kind of grab me and shake me and be like, come back, I really want you to be here. And it took some years, like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. And then all of a sudden I was like popping out of these funny trance states. I love your word for them, that you call them unconscious programs. I'd said that right, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. You got it.
And that I often call unconscious contracts. I remember the day that I was telling my friend about my beloved father and how perfect he was. And she said something like, that was very annoying at the time, like, I don't believe he's so perfect, or something like that. And it was like that trance I was in popped. And I was like, oh, yeah, he's lovely, but he's really depressed and he's not perfect. And it was like stepping out of a cocoon, a gray, soft cocoon where I was describing the world as being different than it actually was. And so that was my first extraordinary woman, was this very funny woman. And then my second woman was the woman who took Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, put it together with relational neuroscience, and created a healing methodology for healing trauma with a very specific and intentional way of being with language. So I'll stop there because I've talked for a long time. How are you doing over there, Michelle?
I am doing very well. I just had such like a compassion wave for your mother's mother, for your mother, for you, of just this loss, like that fragmentation, that just trauma, life's dominoes that fall, and how we do our best, like she was trying to, and I really honor these unconscious contracts or programs that they try to help us the best we can, and yet they have fallout, and how then do we heal that fallout? Well, I think you're about to tell me. One, it takes somebody who's willing to kind of get in there with us and show us that there's like a different world, like, because we don't know it. When you're living in that, you don't know that's the soup you're swimming in. that to you is reality. And until somebody with a different point of view, a different perspective, or like I work with horses too. And so I call it a view on the fence post. If I turn one way, it looks completely different. And that beautiful woman came in there, and those two dominoes came together, and they created awakening.
Yes, awakening. And that's what I hope that I get to do. I mean, I really thought about, the way that, and in both the affirmations book and in your resonant self, I really thought about the way that I had been held, and tried to create a book that holds the reader in a similar way, because it's hard to find somebody who's like, no, come back to me, come back to me.
and is there, like, predictably there. And I think that is what your work does. As somebody who's witnessed your work, I want to just validate, not that you need that, but just reflect that back to you, that it definitely does. It holds you. And I think that is a testament to the field that you have created that can hold that.
Oh, that makes me very happy. And so there I was. The second woman's name was Susan Sky, and she really understood, made sense of the research that shows us that the amygdala has no sense of time. The amygdala holds our emotional memories, and it's a forever. Once you get an emotional memory in there, it's a forever present. William Faulkner wrote, "The past, the past is never gone. It's not even the past." I think something like that. I may be misquoting him.
That's pretty close, I think.
Same idea that, that when we have a stuck memory and we step back into it, boom, we're in it. We feel the shame. We feel the fear. We feel the dread. We feel the frozenness. And she said, not only can our brains ambush us and carry us back in time, but other people can go with us and bring us back from those places that we fall into with the ambushes. This is what Susan Sky said. So I started to study her work. I was like, this is really extraordinary that we can have something that changes brains. That's not medical. That's not instrument. Isn't an instrument. That isn't a magnetic field. It's people being together. This is really interesting. So if you go and you do 100 time travels into people's memories, then you'll become really good at it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to take this seriously, because I got to tell you, I was not good at this starting out because I didn't have an insula. The insula is the part of your brain that tells you what's happening in your body. People would say, what are your body sensations? And I would say, I don't know. What do you mean body sensations? And our body sensations are hugely supportive for being in relationship with other people and letting other people know that we're attuning to them and giving them a sense of safety and so on. So it took me a while, and I worked hard because I really loved the idea that we could be with people in this way. And I get to love doing it every day now.
So beautiful. And I love that the term she used, which is you can time travel with them. And so they're not, by themselves. And I like to use the words like, I'm walking with you. I'm getting in that river with you. And we're going to go in and we're going to come back out, And so I love that you became a time traveler. Who knew, Sarah?
Yeah.
And working with people. So amazing. So how did you discover, let's kind of like maybe fast forward a little bit. How did you discover that through this connection of being with somebody in those moments where they got hijacked, in those moments where they were lost in space and time, and you could travel with them and provide that constant, come back with me, and that I'm here with you, you're not alone, and help them find their ways back out? What is the way in which you started to bring your uniqueness to that work?
I think it really becomes very unique with the convergence of the time travel work and the unconscious contract work. Unconscious contract, then unconscious contracts taken from the very early work of Bert Hellinger, who was the developer of family constellations, and a later writer and constellator named Stefan Hausner, who wrote a beautiful book. He's a naturopath and does health and constellations. And he wrote a beautiful book called Even If It Costs Me My Life, which I found really inspiring, because as I started to travel around the world with the first book, I would tell people about the neuroscience of self-compassion and how we need self-warmth. And people would be like, yeah, I totally get that we need it, but I just can't do it. And I would be sitting there with them, and I would have this feeling like it's not even in integrity for this person to have warmth for themselves. Somehow it violates their love of truth, or their love of loyalty, or their love of their parents. And so I was like, what is it that's happening that people can't be warm with themselves, and it's some kind of integrity? And I thought they must have like a contract with themselves. And this contract must be something that maybe has never been put into words before. Because if things haven't been put into words before, then it's like this word program that you use, an unconscious program that's running us, that we don't even know how to access. We can guess at some part of it, like we can know that we believe that we're bad. Hi, Sarah. That's what I came out of childhood with. With my mom, I was like, I will know that I'm bad. I will believe completely. I will be completely committed to the belief that I'm a bad person in order to explain my mom's incapacity to remember that I even exist, And I didn't know that in order to, all I knew was that I was believing that I was bad, and that the inside of my brain, instead of being a cozy, warm, welcoming home with beautiful, fragrant smells of homemade cooking and soft, colorful cushions on the couch, instead, my inside of my home was dirty and smelled of burnt food and was cold and had sharp corners and no cushions. And that's what happens with trauma, is that the inside of our brains are less fun to live in. So I was like, okay, what happens if we ask people to turn these unworded programs into agreements with themselves? And so I started to do this with people. I will believe that I'm bad in order to be in integrity with my love of truth, no matter the cost to myself. And you're like, does your most essential self really find that to be a very good contract? Is this contract life-serving? Do you actually want to keep it? And many times people would say, oh, well, now that you mention it, no.
I didn't know that was an option before. I had a client who told me one time it was like she didn't even know option C was there. Then she knew option C was there, but she couldn't click it. And then all of a sudden, one day she realized not only could she click option C, but there was a whole nother drop-down list of options available to her. And that's kind of like what you're talking about, right? Like when that's our brain and that's what it was conditioned in, and these are our contracts that we're just running, and they are our truth, because that's how we made sense of the world when we had no language, when we had no we were a me-centered self back then. We didn't have the ability to zoom out and see it from different perspectives. And so of course, you're going to believe that's going to sound really reasonable to your system. I must be bad, therefore that is why she can't show up for me, and it just sinks in until somebody comes along and says, you know what? And that's what your work does. It helps people put words to that so they can compassionately challenge that and say, does this really still work for me?
Right. Right. Now that I've named what's really there, like sometimes people, when they name what the real truth of the contract is, their ears will turn bright red, or they'll have a rush of heat through their upper body, feel funny and warm. Sometimes there will be tears that come when they name what it is that they've really been up against. Yeah, that I will believe this because it's a matter of integrity for me to believe this.
It's the truth of what you needed to believe about yourself in order to survive. And I think what I loved about your work is that it honors that. It doesn't just poo-poo it as a mindset change or something. It really honors that this is the coding this is the belief system, the value, the integrity of how we believe our role in the universe and in our life is.
Yeah.
And can we compassionately start to challenge that? So once you help someone kind of name that and they kind of say, yeah, Sarah, I don't think this isn't what my essential self believes in. This isn't who I really be and in my heart and my soul. What's the next step?
Next step is to say, would you like to release this contract? And people will often say, yes, I would. I release myself from this contract. I revoke this vow. And then we'll say, and instead, what blessing will you give yourself? And they will say, instead of thinking that I'm bad, I give myself the blessing to have warmth for myself just as I am, and to not have to be either bad or good, to just let go of stories and be and care for myself with warmth and affection. And that's very different.
Mm-hmm. When that difference comes in, what have you noticed happens within that system of self? Like this idea, I can release this and I can replace it with this blessing. I'm blessing myself versus kind of cursing myself, right? Yeah. What then starts to unfold in that person? Because I can want that and I can start to claim that, but what happens after that?
Well, one of the contracts that I worked with for a long time, that was my own contract, was a contract to be a workaholic. I will work without ceasing. And I worked with that. I guessed all kinds of things for myself. Was it because I wanted to be loyal to my mother? Because I wanted my mother to love me? Because I wanted to justify the burden of my existence. I tried all kinds of things. And then one day I was sitting and working, and I thought, gosh, I just can't stop working. I just work all the time. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And I thought, for the first time, I thought of the words busy bee. I will be a busy bee. I will never stop working. And then somehow those words took me right where I needed to go, which was, I will never stop working in order to keep my father with me so that I don't have to acknowledge that he has died.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a big one.
That is a big one.
Yeah, I was all alone and I burst into tears. I don't often cry when I'm alone, but I did that time. Just like these little, kind of crumpled little girl sobs, for the loss of my father. And when I came out of it, it was like I started to be able to take vacations and take naps. I think that's when excuse me.
No worries.
Devotion to naps began. And I have an absolute commitment to naps now. And gently, inviting myself to discover enjoyment in life. And like, what do I love that's not working? And that is not, does not fall under the category of working. Yeah. There's an example from my own life.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful, the curiosity to keep, as you were describing, like, okay, I had to keep working at this. I would think, well, maybe it's this, but nothing would change. And then I would think, well, maybe it's this, and then nothing would change. And when that busy bee, and recognizing that was how you were holding on to your father, to that connection. And then it feels like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like when you allowed yourself to see her, to see that little one that had a loss, and and she had to keep moving, like that when you allowed yourself to release that version of attachment with your dad, maybe it let you hold him differently.
Oh, yes, that was absolutely part of the blessing and to know that I don't have to work myself to the bone to have a connection with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
He's just with me all the time anyway. He doesn't need anything special.
Yeah, you don't have to earn that love. And I think that so many of the different contracts, those subconscious contracts that we have, we're earning our love. We're earning our right to live. We're earning our right to be in connection. And so much of this work is about, can we release that that's actually how connection happens to ourselves, the value that we have to each other, is there another way we can hold our work in a different way?
Yeah.
And all that beautiful work. Well, thank you for sharing that. That is such a beautiful story, and a beautiful blessing that came through
Yeah.
of a shift that came through that work that you have. So the name of your book, which I think is really appropriate, is Affirmations for Turbulent Times. And to me, when I saw this book, I already knew about your work through your resonant self, but I was just like, now this is an affirmation book I'm going to buy. Because right off the bat, it acknowledged the truth, which is we can't gumdrops and roses ourselves to everything and butterflies. Like their life will always have grit. It will always have highs and lows. I mean, the beautiful late Desmond Tutu, he said in his book of joy with the Dalai Lama, finding joy, my friends, I'm sorry to say, does not exempt us, this is paraphrasing, from hardships and heartbreak. We're going to actually laugh more and cry more. We're going to feel and engage in more. And so now the question then says, well, how do we find center in that? And I love that your book just right off the bat in the title says, hey, turbulent times are a part of life, and they're going to be with us. And so now how do we find that resonance? How do we find ourselves in that process? So can you tell me a little bit about this book and how it kind of came forward and how you work with affirmations? Because you were the first person whenever I was like, oh my gosh, this is how I work with them. And I was so excited about it. And so,
Oh, I'm so wonderful to have shared, this common ground. Well, it was, the pandemic had been dragging on for quite some time, at the point at which my editor called me and said, Sarah, I really think we should book that speaks to people about the hard times that we're living in, and I think you're the one to do it. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, it'll be an affirmations book. And I was like, wow, affirmations. And I had this, I had some doubt about affirmations, but I also had some deep affection for them because I really came of age in the 1980s when Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live was coming to the big screen, and then had his own affirmations book, which was called I'm Good Enough, I'm Smart Enough, and Doggone It, People Like Me. And it had titles of the chapters like, I am entitled to file for an extension on my income taxes. And there was something in that, deep acknowledgement of where we're actually starting, which is such a different place than where affirmations often presuppose that we're able to start. There's a sense of humor and also just like a truth telling that's part of the of a really sweet affirmation, one that touches you and gives you some kind of real basis for hope, because we're kind of naming everything that we're up against, and then we're moving to the affirmation. So what I proposed to my editor and what I ended up doing was it was facing pages, and on the left side of the page there would be wonderings, and on the right side of the page would be, it was like I guess I can't remember what you call them, but the facing page and the other. And so these two pages faced each other. So on one page, wonderings, on the other page, affirmations. And so I would take different subjects. My editor and I were like, okay, here's the list. We went back and forth about what the list should be. But one of the ones that I love the most is one that was about responsibility and the way that we often feel really overburdened with responsibility in this world. So I thought, if we acknowledge how overburdened everybody is, then we can move into like what is not only what affirmation might feel true, but what affirmation is really needed if we really scope out what the problem is. So I made guesses for myself and all of the people I know who carry too much responsibility. And I wrote for the wondering side, are you feeling overwhelmed with the constant calls for your attention? Do you have the sense of being a crisis call center for so many, and at the same time needing to be able to focus on yourself in order to be able to pull things together, to make the money that needs to be made, and to take care of the things that need to be done? And at the same time, would you love to be kind and patient?
Yes, please.
Is patience an impossible dream right now? Is your nervous system hanging by its last thread? Would you like to feel comfortable asking for support from others to refrain from interrupting you when you are working? Do your nerves need a soothing balm of quiet in order to be able to focus and work? And then the affirmation, then once we get all that truth-telling done, then we can reach for true, sweet, supportive affirmations. I am gentle and affectionate with myself even when I am impatient. I acknowledge the tornness created by all the competing claims on my time and attention. I claim my own space to breathe no matter what is happening around me. I have my own peace, my own quiet, and my own choice about how I think and how I feel. I am a breathing, existing being in my own right, and my sovereignty is inviolable. I understand the impossibility of doing it all, and I release myself from any internal pressure I have on myself to finish everything. I welcome my sense of humor about living in a state of constant triage.
I like the musing side, the wondering side, but your affirmation side, I definitely was like, I'm going to work with one of these sentences like a day or a week. You know what I mean? Like whichever one is really calling to me that week. And the sense of humor with the constant triage it's just speaking so much to me right now in this moment. I'm like, oh yeah, that is true, with like kids and job and friends and family, and deadlines and all those other things. Like, hey, I can get to those without it. So as you were putting this together, well, do you want to walk through like how would you work with this? If this was you and you opened up and you felt called to this page and you were like, this is talking to me and I'm going to work with this as a practice for a little bit.
Yeah, I would read through the wonderings, first of all, and see what kinds of tugs on my heart were still there. Like what kind of truths did the book not tell about my life? And the truth that the book does not tell about me in this moment, some 2 years after I wrote the book, is that I have some programming about responsibility that probably could be released a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like that I have a belief that I have to be responsible. And there must be an in order to, like the in order to must be something like, in order to make sure I have a place if I work hard. Sort of like this comes back towards my workaholism, that if I'm, here's another one that I have that didn't get named on this page, but that's wonderful. And it's that I will believe that nobody else is responsible.
Have that one. That program's sitting to me. We can both release it right now. We can work.
So if I were writing with these book, I'd write those things down for the next time that I came to this one, so that it would become even more complete and even more true for me. And then I'd come over to the affirmations page, and I would probably, just like you said, spend a little time with each of these sentences. Like in this moment, as I'm reading for myself, imagining myself reading this for me, I am gentle and affectionate with myself, even when I am impatient, almost brings me to tears. That there's a warmth for my impatient self that doesn't always get to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would just kind of go through it and see how my body responds to each sentence and what starts to release. So a gentle and affectionate with myself, even when I'm impatient, gives me a little bit of tears. Then I acknowledge the tornness created by all the competing claims on my time and attention. This is true. There are so many competing claims on my time and attention. And there is a tornness. And as I name it, there's a little more breath in my lungs, and I can sort of feel the ripped edges of my heart in a way. And then kind of going on from there, or that maybe I would put some more notes in, like ripped edges of my heart. What would be a good affirmation for that? And I bring together the ripped edges of my heart in the tornnesses that I live with, for example. Mm-hmm. So that's how I would be with this book. Did I do it okay? Did I do it?
It's beautiful. And what I think the invitation with this, with all your work, but with this book too, is that invitation to slow down and do the reflective journaling, to do what I call the somatic work while in partnership with it. So it's not just, I'm going to tape this thing on my wall and just say it to my system over and over and over, because if it feels that you're not kind and gentle with your impatient self, then the invitation is like, okay, well, can I get curious? What is happening in those moments? How am I treating my impatient self? Am I judging it that it shouldn't even be there? I'm supposed to be this like kind and compassionate person, and I shouldn't have impatience, that. And so then maybe I need to go look for some unconscious programming or contracts in there. Like, what is a kind and compassionate and caring person? Or
increase the frame. Like, I am gentle and affectionate with my impatient self. I am gentle and affectionate with the part of myself that cannot forgive myself for being impatient.
Yeah. And like that then becomes a mantra. So when you catch yourself in the opposite of that, it's like the pause and remembrance of it. And to me, that's the power of affirmations, is it's like it helps us catch those unconscious words, right? It helps us catch when those programs are just on autopilot, coming out of our mouth, coming into our furrowed brow, our hands on hips, like without even recognizing it. And then we're like, oh, whoops, I'm working on this right now. Let me just hold that part that's holding that part, in that stance. And can we bring some love to that and that compassion to it? So to me, it like helps us like follow through with that committed action. Like the first one sets that intention out, but then as we continue to work with it as a guiding force, not just a fun little statement, that's how that affirmation work can really help us work with the turbulence of the ups and downs of life.
And since the 1980s, when people first really started to, maybe the 70s, people first started to really experiment outside of theosophy with affirmations, that some people have been doing research into whether or not they are effective. And it turns out that they do help us. And I think for me, with my own skepticism and my own trauma history, they help me much more if I get to do the wondering first, the truth telling, the complex truth telling. Yeah.
Well, I think that step that you put in, the wonderings, that truth telling, as you call it, I think that allows our system to be seen, to be witnessed. Like, we want this to be our truth. We want to click that option. However, our truth has been the exact opposite. Our truth is something different, and so if we can acknowledge that and see it, and we can say, hey, can we help you? Can we help you shift this? Like, we don't have to stay in this type of house. We don't have to stay with the sharp edges and the dark rooms and the sterile environments. Like, we can have some cushions in here. We can have some beautiful scents and smells and companionship in here. Like, this can be a different relationship. And I think that the Wonderings invite us into actually getting the buy-in from our system versus it just waiting us out. It's like, go ahead, say whatever you want to say. I'm going to be back here running a different program,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
and putting that together.
Mm-hmm.
How do people work with you? How do they come into being able to be in a learning lab with you or an environment with you?
Well, a lot of times they start with the YouTube videos and stuff like this. They come across a podcast and they listen and then they think, oh, that kind of helps me. And they go and they find other videos and they watch videos. I get that a lot, that people say, I found you from YouTube. And this is, of course, I need some wonderings and some affirmations for myself right here, because it's very hard for me to make YouTube videos because I'm always alone and I'm like, I don't like being alone.
I hear you.
I need somebody else standing on the other side of the computer screen who's grinning at me and talking to me, to be able to make those YouTube videos. So I need some like acknowledgement and warmth and some little bit of course, Sarah, of course you don't want to make your own videos alone.
I will say that to you. Of course, Sarah, you don't want to. It's not very fun, and you do have to kind of work on it. I have some tips and some possible option C's that might work, but you keep going, and then we'll circle back around if you want to.
And so, because I love it when people find this work and come to the classes, and they'll start with something that they get tempted by, some little subject that tempts them, and they'll come into a class and they'll sit back with their camera off and they'll listen for a year or so, or sometimes they come right in and start participating, but sometimes they're like, I am too shy. Let me just watch this and stay out of the breakout rooms and see whether or not it feels like a safe place. And then once they get the sense that it might be safe, then they start to relax and explore and start to do both the time travels and the contract work that happens in the classes. There's lots of opportunities for people to walk through contract work in a sort of a chat process. Well, I'll do it all together, so it's not so scary and we're not alone. And just think about like different subjects. What do we know about attachment? What does the research tell us about adult attachment? How are we impacted by things we don't even remember from our earliest childhood? What are those attachment programs that are put into place? And like all the other contracts, what happens if we name them aloud and start to release them? Then we might be moving toward secure attachment, out of avoidant attachment or ambivalent attachment or disorganized attachment. We might be moving toward kind of a sense of a safe, juicy world that obviously needs a lot of support and care, but that is an inviting place for us.
I love sharing attachment theory with people, because I think it helps, like you said, it helps us name a felt sense that had no words, and to be able to really see it. And it's that, of course, it's that validation. And, it's like you can watch that light bulb go off and it's like, of course I'm going to have a push me, pull me desire with this. Of course I'm going to want to, I call it my throw a stick of dynamite in it. And then I feel safer when everything is like chaotic and for us
Yeah.
disorganized attachments as our default setting. And then, like compassion for, of course, then I want to get a little, avoidant, a little dismissive, a little bit like, yeah, I'm just going to be over here doing my own thing as we're walking our way back to this secure attachment to ourselves, which then allows us to offer that space to the other, right? Um, and I think what you were talking about before is when our body doesn't know that, when we have had to cut off the sensations of what that feedback is, this beautiful feedback system that gives us the ability to sense, to see, to feel, to hear, to connect. When that's cut off, it's really hard to imagine that we could feel secure
It is.
in ourselves, let alone somebody else.
Yeah, and it's also really hard to have a sense of the magic of the world, When I was little, I used to, I was trying to figure out how to survive in a world where my mom didn't recognize me sometimes. And I read all the time and found myself in the main characters of the books that I was reading. Just recently, I've been rereading Alice in Wonderland, which is something that I read many times as a little one. And I'm like, I didn't even remember that this scene existed, but I remember the bewilderment of the drinking the different potions and becoming huge and then too small to reach the key on the table, and just that sense of distortion of self was something that I recognized myself in and found myself in the falling. She falls and falls in the beginning scenes. And that was my recurring nightmare. And I think, as I became an adult, I even discovered that there's a phenomenon that comes with depersonalization or derealization, which are big psychological words that say that the person doesn't feel real or that the world doesn't feel real. And I was like, oh, this is Alice in Wonderland. This was a way that I found my distorted sense of self and reality in the books that were there for me, which helped me to feel, sane and like I made some sense or that I belonged in this world. And that's so important.
Mm-hmm. I think that what you're talking about, that going from confusion to finding something that helps things make sense, right? That helps you start to feel like there was some rhyme or reason to what our system was up to, and if it hadn't figured that out, that would have been really devastating for us. And so I always kind of go like, I'm in wonder of these parts of ourselves that come up with it, that can adapt, that problem solve. And yeah, it's problematic when we get a little older, I'll give it that. But you think of like how it helped us in this completely tailored way meet that moment, that nothing else would have been the medicine for that moment. And I study a lot of shamanism, and there's a saying in shamanism that the medicine is in the wound, right? Like, and that when we do this work and when we start with that seeker of truth and seeing that light and shining that light, we get to actually look to the wound versus just trying to cover it up. And then the medicine that's in it actually can come forward.
Such a beautiful idea, and speaks to the power of our lived experience to help us contribute to others and bring others out of dark and cold and cramped brains into more warm and juicy and fun brains to live in. So if I have somebody recently wrote to me and said, I lived through very bad abuse when I was a child, and I worry all the time that it will mean that I won't be able to help others. That I am too broken to be able to contribute. And I said, the strange paradox of this work. Now, I probably needed to do some more acknowledgement first, some wonderings. Would you like a little acknowledgement of how much you love to contribute and how scary this is? But I'll cut to the second part. Was, would it be surprising to know that what we've lived through makes us available to support and heal our own brains, but other people's brains too? That it helps us, that our understanding of how bad it was for us means that we are unflinching with the experiences that other people bring us. We're unfazed. We're like, yeah, well, yeah, totally. If we don't have any bad experiences, other people bring us stuff and we're like, oh, that never would have happened.
Yeah, like, how is that possible? I can't believe it, and like the wonder, and then the person's trying to put the other person back together because they're like, whoa, I just brought them into a view of the fence post they didn't have before. And so that to that person, to that beautiful person, and anybody else that's listening, is like, when we can find that medicine, right? You have found your medicine and you share it and in these books and in your work, and when we can awaken to that and embody that, then we can help other people wake up to their medicine.
Yes. And everybody's got a different medicine. This is one of the things I love, is that each person, as they start to heal, has something different to offer and will offer that healing in a different way. And I really love that. I love the understanding that we all have gifts that are different from other people's gifts.
It's so interesting because it's just as you were talking, my eyesight zoomed in on your beautiful instrument behind you and to that and I was like, it's the orchestra, it's the symphony, it's that everybody is bringing their own tone, their cadence, their own, and even if we're all playing the same music, it's completely individualized and it has each person's essence. When you said that essential self, like my essential self, like that is the essence. Like, I don't like to use the term higher self or stuff like that because it makes it mechanical. It makes it something different outside of me that has something. I like to use wisdom, and now I might even use essential self because I love that. I'll give you a nod every time. But it's just so beautiful because we all each do have that instrument, and just like how you can bring in different resonance and different notes, like one that's nervous or scared or bold and courageous, like each and every one of those tones has a story and something to share and invoke.
Yeah, and I love the idea of an orchestra and everybody playing different instruments, but I also love the idea of in Portland, Oregon, every Christmas they have Tuba Christmas, and they have 42 tubas that come and play together to play the Christmas carols in one of the squares. And each tuba player plays differently, that.
Yeah. So like even within the instruments, they're all very different. I was a drumline like kid, so I played drums, and so I love like drumming and percussion and all of that stuff. And so like even in that same way, the way in which you're just even bringing that in, I love that. And all of that different thing. It's just so many ripples, and I see your work and this offering, and even the responsibility of holding that differently, of being able to say, I am breathing, existing, and being in my own right, my own sovereignty is infallible. Like, that's where my eye just went right now. And like to feel that and to truly like believe you don't have to earn that.
Yeah. Oh,
that is just a gift. Oh, I'm like tearing up, man. I'm like getting all teary. Well, is there any other words of wisdom or parting practices or anything that you would like to share that we didn't have a chance to talk about today?
The two things I think are that you can start really small. You can start with just one breath of self-warmth. And if you don't, there are meditations in the book that you can read, but also they're on the website. You can download the meditations. It's on the Start Healing Now button on the sarahpeyton.com website.
Which we'll put the links in the show note for that.
And you can just even take away like a couple lines from one of the meditations of just starting to breathe. And as you breathe, just have affection for where your attention goes. Sort of like we were saying, having affection for your impatience, and then having affection for your contempt, your self-contempt and judgment for your impatience, and having affection for your exhaustion about having contempt and judgment, so that you just start to kind of just learning to get a little bigger than your own pain every time. And even just one breath of self-warmth, just one breath where you're warm with where your attention goes, starts to rehab and refab and remodel our brains. And then the other thing I want to say is a sentence that I really love is, it's not truth, it's trauma. If you are beating yourself up, if you are telling yourself that you're not good enough, or that people don't like you, or that you are too much, or that you are too little, or that you don't know how to talk, or that you don't know how to write, or that you do everything wrong, those are not truths. Those are the voice of trauma. Mm-hmm. And so we get to just begin to acknowledge that. I think it's like such a sweet starting place.
Yeah, well, maybe we can do just a quick little practice of that to close out of taking that breath in.
Mm-hmm. So shall I lead it?
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Okay. So if you just for a moment acknowledge that you are a breathing being, and let yourself inhale. And as you inhale, notice that you can feel where the sensations of the breath are, that it might hit the back of your throat, or it might make you feel like your shoulders or your chest moves, or that your belly moves when you breathe. And just choose whichever place on that path of your breath is most alive. So for me, it's most alive right now down my throat. And so I just bring my attention there. And as I inhale, I'm like, oh, Sarah's sweet attention. Thank you for staying with the breath. Or if it goes somewhere else, starts going to an itch, you go, oh, attention, of course you're going to the itch, because you're trying to take care of me. You want to make sure that we are in good shape and that all of our outer surfaces of skin are doing well. Do you need some acknowledgement that you get totally distracted when there's an itch, and then you're breathing? Now, this is already more than one breath, but this is the idea, is just one breath of sweetness for wherever we go. Or I breathe in and I get angry at my neighbor, and I'm like, okay, hello and welcome. And of course you're angry. And do you love both for things to be fair and for people not to continually park in front of your house? And do you also just have such a love of integrity and warmth, and you just want to be a warm neighbor? Are you disappointed in yourself? And of course, all of these complex feelings are happening at once. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, just really just giving that compassion to the self. And then that sentence of it's not truth, it's trauma becomes all of a sudden very believable from this space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, Miss Sarah. Well, it has been such a pleasure, collaborating with you to bring this forward, to witnessing your work and bringing it into my own world. And I just looked at the time, and it's like 4:44 Eastern time. And I love those like numbers that are just like kind of come in together with like fun signs. So it's been such an honor to see your light, to witness your medicine that you have. And thank you so much for being a part of this soulful conversation and sharing your light with the world.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. What a pleasure.
Okay. I'll see everybody on the next Soulful Practice conversation. Thank you for listening to Soulful Practices. For more information on how to work directly with me or one of my guests, check out the show notes below. We'd love for you to also let us know what parts of this episode are speaking to you and how this practice is supporting you on your healing and spiritual journey. Please share this podcast with fellow seekers, travelers. Together, we can create a wave of soul-led beings in this world, offering you light, love, and joy on your journey. Michelle Holling Brooks. Until next time.